Welcome to the debate. Most small business owners don't have an HR department, but they're still fully responsible for everything that comes with it.
Right, yeah. It's a huge burden.
It really is. So today we're diving into some fascinating research that looks closely at the reality of running a small to medium enterprise, or SME. Specifically, what happens when the informal, highly flexible ways small businesses handle their people inevitably collide with formal labor laws.
And they always do collide eventually, don't they?
Exactly. Reading through the material, I just kept coming back to one glaring vulnerability. For me, the biggest hidden risk for a small business operating without an HR safety net is the absolute void of documented proof. It's the structural reality that when a casual dispute turns into a formal legal challenge, well, intention means nothing without a paper trail.
See, I read the exact same research, and I walked away with a completely different takeaway.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to argue that having a paper trail isn't useful, but focusing strictly on the paperwork is kind of treating the symptom instead of the disease. The core vulnerability isn't what's missing from the filing cabinet. It's the reactive, erratic mindset driving the business every single day. The culture of putting out daily fires and making HR decisions on the fly creates this deep, systemic inconsistency. That behavioral inconsistency is the catalyst. It's what actually breeds unfairness and pushes an employee to seek formal arbitration in the first place.
Okay, let's ground this in the day-to-day reality of an SME, because I want to make sure we're accurately painting the picture of why these risks go completely unnoticed for so long.
Sure, yeah.
Think about the typical setup. You have an owner wearing 5 different hats on any given Tuesday. Or maybe there's an overburdened admin team member, someone whose actual job is invoicing and customer service, who has suddenly inherited the title of HR just by sheer default.
Right, and because it's not their actual profession, HR is handled entirely in the margins. I mean, it's handled between a delayed supplier shipment and a client phone call.
Exactly. And because of that, things feel under control as long as there are no blazing fires. The staff are working, the business is generating revenue.
Yeah, everything seems fine.
Right. A missing employment contract here, an undocumented verbal warning there. They don't cause any immediate disruption. So the business owner develops this profound false sense of security. They think, well, the business is running fine, so my HR must be fine.
Right.
But the void of evidence is sitting right there in the background. It's invisible until the business is placed under acute stress.
I agree, the risk is sitting in the background, but let me push back on what that risk actually is. You're framing it as a missing document, but I look at that exact same Tuesday morning with the owner juggling 5 hats, and I see a behavioral time bomb.
A behavioral time bomb? How so?
Well, the danger isn't just that they didn't write down a warning. The danger is that they've normalized an ad hoc culture. They're operating on the belief that, we'll deal with it if it happens is a viable strategy just because their headcount is low.
Because they have a small team.
Exactly. They assume that because they have a small family-like team, they possess the inherent wisdom to navigate complex human relations purely on gut instinct.
But that family-like team dynamic is precisely why they don't document anything. They trust their people.
Relying on informal trust in a business is like driving without a seatbelt because you trust the other drivers on the road.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
It works perfectly fine until someone else swerves. When the owner passes HR duties to an admin member who is completely untrained in labor law, they are cementing a culture of improvisation.
Right.
Every time an issue is handled informally, say an employee comes in complaining about a shift change, and the admin just says, look, just go home early today and cool off. You are teaching the team that the rules are subjective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You are teaching them that discipline depends entirely on how busy the owner is that day or, frankly, who the favorite employee happens to be.
Wait, let me pause you there, because I think we need to separate the internal culture from the external reality of the law. Let's say you're right, and the rules are subjective. Let's say the owner's improvising.
Which they usually are.
Right. But that improvisation only becomes fatal to the business because there is no structural containment when things escalate. Let's walk through the actual timeline of what happens when the informal suddenly becomes formal.
You mean when the car actually crashes?
Yes, exactly. Let's look at a realistic scenario drawn from the source material. An SME owner reaches their breaking point with an underperforming employee. Maybe the employee is chronically late or failing to hit targets, and the relationship just fractures.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
The owner, acting reactively, as you said, fires them. Suddenly, that dismissed employee walks out the door and files a dispute at the CCMA, the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation, and Arbitration here in South Africa. At that exact moment, the environment changes at light speed.
It really does. You are dragged out of your comfortable informal office into a highly structured adversarial space.
Yes, and I want to explain exactly how that space operates, because I think a lot of small business owners fundamentally misunderstand this. A CCMA commissioner is not a therapist.
No, they definitely aren't.
They are not there to listen to the owner vent about how stressful the employee was to manage. Arbitration operates on a strict evidentiary basis. If the employee says, "I was fired unfairly without warning," and the owner says, "No, I gave you plenty of warnings," it's a he said, she said situation.
Right.
In the eyes of the law, that scale is perfectly balanced at 50-50. The only thing that tips the scale, the only weight the arbitrator recognizes, is documented proof.
Sure, but let me jump in here.
Where is the signed contract? Where are the minutes of the hearing? Go ahead.
I hear your focus on the tribunal, but hold on. Let me push back hard on this idea that the paperwork is the ultimate shield. Let's take your exact scenario. Let's say the business owner does have the paperwork. Let's say they downloaded a basic contract and they actually took the time to type out a formal warning before they fired the person.
Okay.
Do you think that makes them bulletproof at the CCMA?
Well, it makes them significantly more defensible than if they had nothing.
More defensible, maybe, but certainly not bulletproof. And honestly, often they will still lose. Let me explain why. The CCMA doesn't just look at whether a piece of paper exists.
Right.
They scrutinize the process and the consistency of how that rule was applied across your entire business. Labor law requires both substantive fairness, meaning there was a good reason to fire them, and procedural fairness. If that fired employee can prove that the owner applies the rules differently to different people, well, the paper is useless.
Give me an example of how that plays out.
Sure. Say you fire someone for being chronically late, and you have the written warnings to prove it.
Right.
But that employee points out that your top salesperson is also late 3 days a week, and you've never written them up, you've never even spoken to them about it, because they bring in so much money.
Ah, I see.
In that moment, your typed warning doesn't save you. The arbitrator looks at your erratic, biased application of the rules and rules in favor of the employee. A printed contract cannot save a business from a culture of reactive inconsistency.
Okay, that's a fair point. If you have the documents but selectively enforce them, you're exposing your own bias.
Exactly.
But let me turn that around on you. How do you prove to a third-party arbitrator that you have been consistent over a period of 2 years without written records? You can't. You're relying entirely on hearsay. If you want to prove that you treat everyone the same, you need the paper trail for everyone. So we are back to the objective lack of structure.
Not exactly. You're looking at the end of the timeline, the tribunal. I am looking at the beginning of the timeline. My argument is that proactive, consistent behavior is what actually prevents the dispute from reaching the CCMA in the first place.
Wait, you think employees won't sue if the owner has a better mindset?
I know they won't, or at least it's incredibly rare. Why do employees seek external arbitration? It's rarely just about the money.
Right?
They do it because they feel fundamentally wronged, targeted, or humiliated. It's deeply personal.
That's true.
If an owner has a proactive, consistent mindset, treating every single tardiness the exact same way, treating every grievance with the exact same measure of respect, regardless of whether it's their favorite employee or the new hire, the friction that causes the explosion never sparks. You are obsessing over having a fire extinguisher at the tribunal. I am trying to stop the owner from playing with matches in the workplace.
That's a great analogy, but small business owners are humans running highly stressful operations. They are going to play with matches.
Well, yeah.
You are arguing that reactive problem solving is the root cause of the risk. But human beings are inherently reactive. When a small business owner is juggling a cash flow crisis, a supply chain issue, and an angry client, and an employee walks in with a grievance, the owner is going to be reactive.
Sure, they're stressed.
They are going to be emotional. The only way to mitigate that fundamental human flaw is to build a structural cage around it.
A structural cage. That sounds very corporate.
It doesn't have to be complex, but it has to be tangible. I'm talking about clear written processes for disciplinary situations, employment contracts that are properly set up.
Right.
When a business owner is required by their own internal process to sit down and write out a warning, the very act of documenting it forces them to pause. It forces them to articulate the problem clearly. It removes the immediate emotion and anger from the situation.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
The physical artifact, the document, acts as a mechanism that regulates their behavior. It shifts them from subjective memory to objective reality.
I understand the theory behind that, but you cannot build a structural cage around a mindset that actively resists it. Let's go back to the source material and those common SME thinking patterns we discussed.
Right, the mindsets.
We trust our people. We're a small team. We don't need corporate bureaucracy. These aren't just passing thoughts for an entrepreneur. They are deeply ingrained cultural values. Many people start small businesses precisely to escape the rigid structure you're talking about.
Yes, definitely.
They view formal HR as an enemy to their agile, family-like culture.
Which is a massive blind spot.
It is, but until you address that psychological barrier, your structural cage will be completely ignored. If an owner believes that formalizing an employment relationship damages the trust they have with their team, they will deliberately bypass your written processes.
Yeah, they'll just avoid it.
They will say, I don't want to make things weird by making them sign this warning. We'll just talk it out. And if an owner just wants to tick a box to feel safe, they'll go online, Google South African employment contract template, print it out, get the employee to sign it, and shove it in a drawer. They think they have your structure.
Well, a downloaded template that isn't understood is definitely a vulnerability.
It's worse than a vulnerability, it's a false promise. If they don't change how they actually manage their people, that document does nothing. The intervention has to be behavioral first.
Okay, I'm tracking with you.
The owner has to realize that trust is not a scalable HR strategy. Trust is fantastic for morale, but it is terrible for compliance. You have to change the way they view the necessity of consistency before you can ever get them to utilize the documents properly. Structure is not just a filing cabinet full of neatly typed policies. Structure is a repeated behavior.
I hear what you're saying about trust, and it highlights a really fascinating paradox in SME management. The owner relies heavily on the family dynamic because it's efficient, it's cheap, and it feels good.
Right, it feels good until it doesn't.
Exactly. But it's precisely that informal dynamic that gets weaponized when a relationship sours. The employee who was like family suddenly knows exactly how informal the business is, and they use that lack of structure against the owner at the CCMA.
Exactly, because when things go wrong, the family dynamic disappears and the legal dynamic takes over.
But here is where I struggle with your behavioral-first approach. When that illusion shatters, the psychological realization happens far too late. The owner doesn't lose the CCMA case because they had a bad mindset. They lose because they can't produce the paper trail.
Well,
The regulatory environment is incredibly unforgiving here. The institutions don't look at a business owner, see a stressed entrepreneur with a team of 6, and decide to lower their judicial expectations.
no, they don't.
Ignorance of the law or claiming we are just a small team offers absolutely no legal protection. The standard is the standard. Ensuring that basic written structures are in place is the only guaranteed way to meet that standard, even if the owner's mindset is still catching up.
But the process doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? It requires a human to execute it. And if the human is erratic, the execution is erratic.
Right.
Let's look at that admin staff member again, the one who suddenly has HR added to their job description. They aren't maliciously trying to destroy the company's compliance, they just lack the training to enforce it uniformly.
Sure.
One day, they might follow the downloaded template perfectly because they happen to have a quiet afternoon. The very next day, the phones are ringing off the hook, the internet goes down, and an employee comes in with a serious grievance. In that moment of stress, the admin person just says, look, go home for the day, we'll sort it out tomorrow.
Which creates a massive liability.
Huge. Because that inconsistency, driven purely by the reactive reality of SME life, is what unravels the business.
Months later, the employee goes to the CCMA and says, they suspended me without a hearing. The business says, no, we just told him to take a cool-down day.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Because the behavior wasn't consistent, the facts themselves become contested territory. It's not just about missing a document, it's about the chaotic way the situation was physically handled in the room.
But if the facts become contested territory, that perfectly illustrates my point. If that admin worker had a rigid structural checklist that required them to document that cool-down day in an email to the employee before they left the building, the territory is no longer contested. The proof exists.
Okay, fair.
The debate we are having really comes down to the sequence of protection. I argue that the physical structure must come first to enforce and regulate the behavior. You argue the behavior must be corrected to give life to the structure.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we're circling the same drain from opposite sides. I'll agree on the end point that an SME needs protection, but getting there requires us to be honest about how small business owners actually operate.
Definitely.
If you just hand them a binder of rules, it will gather dust. They need to understand why their erratic reactions are dangerous before they will ever commit to writing things down.
And I'll acknowledge that adopting the artifacts of HR without the discipline to use them is dangerous. But if we draw from the core of the source material, I think there is a really practical convergence here. The material emphasizes that small businesses do not need complex, multi-tiered corporate HR systems.
No, definitely not.
No one is saying a 5-person bakery needs dedicated departments with advanced, expensive software.
Right. The goal is not to turn a small, agile business into a bureaucratic nightmare. The goal is simply removing the pressure of uncertainty. It's about being prepared so that when a problem arises, and human nature guarantees that a problem will arise, the owner does not have to invent a solution from scratch while under extreme stress.
Never takes a holistic look at both their paperwork and their daily practices.
And that is where the danger truly lies. The assumption that everything is fine just because the building hasn't collapsed yet.
Which requires a moment of genuine practical reflection from the listener. If an SME owner is listening to this, between putting out fires and running their operations, the immediate question they must ask themselves is quite sobering.
Yeah.
They need to ask, if something happened tomorrow, could I prove my decision? It forces a look at the objective reality of their operations. Do the employment contracts actually exist, or are they still on a mental to-do list from 3 years ago? Are the processes for handling disciplinary issues clear, or are they just assumed?
And equally, they must ask, am I consistent in how I handle my people? If someone is late, do I treat my favorite employee the same way I treat the new hire?
Right.
If I look at my actions over the last 6 months, is there a clear, repeatable pattern of fairness, or have I been flying by the seat of my pants, relying on my mood and my gut instinct? The danger isn't that something is on fire today. The danger is the quiet vulnerability building for tomorrow.
To verified preparation. You leave the realm of, I think I am mostly covered, and enter the realm of, I know exactly how this is handled. Most small business owners only realize where their HR stands when they actually stop and check it properly.